My work to date have supported the elimination of violence against women by advocating strongly for measures to be put in place that will help women, especially survivors. Survivors like myself, we have challenges, and what is needed for women who would have survived is a sustainable livelihood program. For example, a sustainable survivors fund that will help women who would have experienced violence to thrive and to survive, because the systems that are put in place does not necessarily always work. And through speaking out and speaking up and advocating all the way to the office of the president or the ministry of the presidency, to have persons who are in charge of the resources to make the resources available so that women can thrive after they would have endured such a heinous bout of violence.
Gender-based violence is a national issue, and it has been one that has been plaguing the disability community over the decades. As a disability rights advocate, I've been doing a lot of work, especially with women and girls living with disabilities, to sensitize them on their rights as women and girls, and more so women and girls with disabilities. We have evidence of many persons with disabilities suffering various forms of abuse, but very little has been done. So as an advocate, we have been trying to change the status quo in relation to gender-based violence in persons with disabilities.
As a constitutional commission, we have 14 mandates set out by the Constitution which guide our work. We consult our stakeholders regularly in all 10 regions of Guyana on our mandates and strategic plan, which includes gender-based violence. We have made recommendations to the National Assembly on an annual basis, and to date we have made more than 70 recommendations on various issues relating to gender empowerment.
Women Refuge Guyana engage, educate, and empower families from inside the community. Through self-esteem training, persons are comfortable to report cases of violence they have experienced. This then results in us doing more in-depth work with communities, families, men, and households. We also support persons to report sexual abuse, rape to the police. Unfortunately, sometimes these cases end up in a cold file due to lack of integrated systems working coherently to bring perpetrators to justice. Working from inside communities is our way of combating gender-based and family violence.
The judiciary of Guyana plays an important role in the response to combating gender-based and family violence. Over the years, there has been training of magistrates and court staff. Magistrates' court offices are now outfitted with interviewing rooms for victims of such violence who seek assistance in making applications under the Domestic Violence Act.
The response of the Rights of the Child Commission is two-pronged. Firstly, at our outreach sessions, which have been held countrywide, we explain to participants what is domestic violence and family violence, and we discuss several scenarios in which it can be encountered. Our commissioners would also discuss with these participants what to look for, since it takes on various forms, not only physical, but also emotional and psychological. Sexual violence is also emphasized with in-depth information on the contents of the Sexual Offences Act being shared. Secondly, through the Commission's complaint mechanism, its investigative officer and the investigative subcommittee of the Commission actively follows up on any complaints in relation to violence involving children. Collaboration is done with the Child Care and Protection Agency.
Over the years, the Guyana Women Minors Organization has been responding to cases of gender-based and family violence. However, we have amplified our efforts through the Dawn Will Come project, which to date has responded to over 300 Guyanese and Venezuelan families, from offering free translation services, food aid relief to temporary housing. We have also referred cases to and partnered with organizations such as IOM, HIAS, PADF, and RCBG to offer assistance to victims. In addition, we have reached over 2,000 persons through various publications.
Ecolgana, as a relatively new organization, has developed new ideas and methodologies to address gender-based violence. This has included the utilization of the visual arts in collaboration with mental health services to ensure that there is a holistic idea and that persons' issues are addressed through a new and innovative methodology. Through activities like Art Splash and 16 Days of Art, we have continued to raise awareness and help persons to develop new coping mechanisms.
At Women's Wednesdays, our work focuses on providing access to information and connecting women and LGBTIQ persons to the resources they need. We have, through multimedia and on-the-ground community activism, been sharing information on sexual and gender-based violence and reproductive rights. We aim to challenge harmful norms and beliefs as these contribute towards the culture of violence and inequality that we have in Guyana. Through public education and leadership building, we let women know the abuse they have been conditioned into believing is okay, is not, and can have significant impacts on their physical and mental health and that of their future generations. We continue to work in collaboration with women's rights movements to support the work of women's liberation because we know that they deserve more.
The Guyana National Youth Council, GNYC, provided oversight for the implementation of consultations in at-risk communities across Guyana for youth crime and violence, where we explored and compiled the factors that trigger this public health threat. In addition to this, we have worked in collaboration with UNHCR to address the vulnerabilities of the migrant population to exploitation and gender-based violence.
My private sector background has enabled my participation in numerous initiatives over the years regarding gender-based and family violence in Guyana. More directly, at Caribbean Container Inc., we have effectively incorporated policies that prohibit gender discrimination, violence, and sexual harassment in the workplace. We hope that by stringently enforcing these policies, our employees will gain perspective that would strengthen their own stand against gender-based and family violence.
This approach will enhance some of the measures that are already in place and will provide the necessary support to those issues that are still in the pipeline. In this regard, we need community intervention measures such as counseling and guidance to victims and perpetrators of domestic and family violence. We need to bring more men on board in this initiative to help influence men who embrace violence against women as their right.
I expect to see lots of culturally responsive training, publicity, and education to enlighten the public, especially those at the grassroots level, about the silent menace of gender-based bashing.
The resources being distributed under Spotlight Guyana to support the work of local women's organizations can greatly help in building the capacity for sustainable and collaborative work. There are better opportunities for rural and indigenous women and girls to access support and services that usually do not reach them. We have had a fairly centralized advocacy framework, and I believe the support from Spotlight Guyana can contribute towards the decentralizing of advocacy initiatives that supports vulnerable communities.
The Spotlight initiative would provide the disability community with much needed resources to ensure that persons with disabilities can be aware of their rights Additionally, they can also be aware of the services available to persons suffering various forms of gender-based violence. Presently, very few persons with disabilities are aware of the services available to them and the pathways that they can travel as a victim of violence.
I think that the New Spotlight initiative can definitely play a role in developing new mechanisms, new methodologies, and more holistic methodologies. Throughout time, we've seen everyone working in their own little facets and developing their own projects that were very specific. However, Spotlight offers a more holistic and general perspective, giving many organizations and many persons the resources that are required to address the issue from a national macro level.
Spotlight initiative can definitively shine a light on the greatest form of exploitation of women, which is human trafficking. Stacked Odds, a new report that is out, shows that 99% of all women and girls are victims of forced sexual exploitation. 84% of all women and girls are victims of forced marriage. And 58% of all women and girls are victims of forced labor. Spotlight can do a great service of speaking to this issue of modern-day slavery, because if we are to really look at the genesis of violence within our society, it has an ugly history all the way back to the transatlantic slave trade. Spotlight can shine a light on men and their need to address the issue too. The issue cannot only be addressed by women alone.
In my respectful view, a scaled-up spotlight approach can make better use of statistics to highlight the existing problem of gender-based violence and family violence, so that the attention of the public can be drawn in a stark way to the seriousness and prevalence of cases. That is the first step to prevention, since there are still members of the public who have doubts about its existence. Further, education of the public in aggressive ways using media in all forms, including social media, would go a far way in providing knowledge so that persons can check their behavior and attitudes and those of others. It is important for people to understand that gender-based violence and family violence are not private matters, and that the public must get involved to ensure protection of those who are vulnerable. And from the RCC's perspective, children would be part of this vulnerable group.
I think Spotlight is a great initiative that has the capacity to change the face of how persons view and respond to gender-based violence, and certainly couldn't have been more timely, especially during this period where, as a result of COVID-19, we have seen an alarming increase in violence, especially amongst women and children, and some of our most vulnerable populations, including the Venezuelan migrant community. So I think because of the scaled-up Spotlight approach being a collective of key service providers and stakeholders, the impact would be tremendous in our efforts to end gender-based violence.
The scaled-up Spotlight initiative in Guyana presents a tremendous opportunity for the country to benefit from additional resources in its fight against gender-based and family violence. Targeted intervention and technical assistance in the areas of laws and policies and institutional strengthening can go a far way in protecting our women and girls. We can ensure the effective enforcement of court-provided protective orders. We can enhance law enforcement's approach to the matter by ensuring a zero-tolerance approach is adopted by them, and we can design and implement systems for the insulation and support of those affected by gender-based and family violence.
We expect the Spotlight initiative to forge more collaborative engagement among stakeholders to prevent gender-based and family violence in communities throughout Guyana.
I believe that Guyana's response in combating gender-based violence and in fighting family violence is currently fragmented. Firstly, I expect that the scaled-up Spotlight approach would be a holistic one, in which a coordinated mechanism would be established to bridge the efforts of government, the media, the private sector, and last but not certainly least, civil society. And secondly, provide sustainable solutions to identify gaps in our system so as to interrupt this vicious cycle of violence.